Ani, Tansei, Sego, Wache, Buju. I would like to acknowledge that we are on the lands, the traditional lands, of the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, the Mississauga of the Credit, and the Haudenosaunee. For over 10,000 years, Indigenous peoples have been the stewards of these lands, watching over the plants, the trees, the water, and the animals that live here. Even in these times of chaos, uncertainty, and isolation, Mother Nature continues to bloom, and we thank the Creator for that. Chimagwech.
Thank you, Indigenous Knowledge Keeper André Morriseau, for being here this morning in High Park at this live event and for acknowledging the land that we stand on. My name is John. I'm with the High Park Nature Center. I'm in the park today to ensure that our animal education ambassadors, our snake and our turtle, are well cared for while the park is closed to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Thank you for keeping each other safe by staying home and watching the cherry blossoms from home this year. And as you can see, they're in full bloom right now. So we're gonna have some time. You can get close. We're gonna give you a close-up view of these blossoms. You can appreciate the beauty of these flowers. And then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about the ecology of these gorgeous trees in High Park. We hope you enjoyed the view. Now let's dig a little bit deeper into the ecology of the cherry trees in High Park. I'm standing here in High Park, and right behind me is some of the black oak savanna. And High Park has some of the last remaining areas of black oak savanna. Black oak savanna is an ecological legacy of Indigenous land stewardship. There are many different species of plants and trees that are in High Park savannas and forests, including 3 native species of cherries. There's the black cherry, the pin cherry, and the choke cherry. And although they're not as showy as the Somei Yoshino Japanese cherry trees, they provide vital food and shelter for local wildlife. The cherry trees that you see blooming right above me are the Somei Yoshino cherry trees, also called sakura trees. And although they're not native to this area, they provide food and shelter for some of the local wildlife as well. Later in the season, these flowers will turn into some cherries. Occasionally, the cherries are small and hard, but cardinals and robins will eat them. The flowers also give nectar, which is, of course, is important for bees, but also for some of the migrating songbirds that are passing through High Park very soon, including Baltimore orioles, Cape May warblers, and hummingbirds, who will soon be seen and probably heard feeding on the nectar from these cherry blossom trees. These trees, as well as all the trees in High Park, increase the canopy cover in High Park. More trees in our cities allows the city to lower its carbon footprint by storing carbon and creating oxygen for us all to breathe. These trees also help clean the soil, the water, and the air by absorbing pollutants such as carbon monoxide and sulfur dioxide. They also create awesome living space for the local wildlife. Holes in the trunks can be homes for squirrels or nesting spots for birds. Branches can be a spot for birds to shelter, perch, or even nest. And the cracks and the crevices in the bark can be overwintering spots for small insects. Now let's take a look at how to identify a cherry tree. One thing to look at is the bark. So on the older part of the trunk, this bark is flaky, cracked, and furrowed. But on the younger bark of the younger branches or the younger trees, you can see these prominent pores. They're called lenticels. And these pores are important because they allow the living cells just below the bark to breathe. They're like little windows. Another thing to look for on cherries are tiny little glands. They're small, but they're distinct, and they're at the base of the leaf. And this tree hasn't fully leafed out yet, so we don't see a lot of these leaves, but you can still see the tiny little glands in there. You almost need a magnifying glass to see them. And these create nectar that will attract ants, and the ants will help protect the leaves of this tree. So starting in the spring, High Park Nature Center, as well as community members like Sakura Steve, begin to track the progress of the blossoms. We start in the spring, in March usually, when the buds start to turn green, and track the progression of the blooms all the way until the petals drop. The blooming period begins when about 20% of the blossoms are open and finishes when the blossoms drop. Peak bloom is defined as when about 70 to 100% of the blossoms are open, which is what we are experiencing right now. Peak bloom happens a very short time, usually between 4 to 10 days. If it's warm and windy, the peak bloom period will be even shorter. If it's cool and calm, peak bloom can expand even longer. The timing of peak bloom varies each year because it is weather dependent. Usually it happens between late April to early May. But in 2016, there was actually no bloom at all due to an unseasonably warm winter and a late, sharp frost. Right now it's spring, and it's a glorious time in High Park because the cherry blossoms are a big part of the attraction. But in High Park, there's lots and lots of blooms all throughout the year. Next, the wild blue lupins, which are a key species of the oak savanna ecosystem, are going to be in bloom, as well as serviceberry trees, red buds, and then later on, there'll be cup plants, milkweeds, blazing star, hairy bush clovers. And then in the fall, of course, asters and the goldenrods. High Park seems solid and firm with its towering oaks. But below my feet, the soil is sand. In fact, throughout all the park, the soil is very sandy, which makes it incredibly vulnerable to erosion. High Park is a well-loved park, but it is also incredibly fragile. When High Park does reopen, please help safeguard this natural wonder by staying on the trails and keeping dogs on a leash. Now we've got some time for questions. Many of you submitted questions on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we've collected a couple of those to answer. First question, are the fruits edible? They're not for people, but they are for birds. I mentioned robins and cardinals, and for small mammals too. Mice, chipmunks, and squirrels will eat the occasional cherries that do form on these trees. Next question, why do some of the older trees have holes in the middle? Does this mean that they are dying? So as you walk through these cherry trees, you will find spots where there's holes and cracks. Trees do age. These are, the life expectancy of a Somei Yoshino cherry tree is about 30 to 40 years until they start to reach the end of their life. But the holes don't necessarily mean that the tree is dying. As long as there is intact layers of bark on the outside of the trees can still live a long, beautiful life. Our next question, can sakura trees survive anywhere in the world? The answer is no. We're actually at the northern limit of the natural range for these cherry trees, and any further north and it would be too cold for these trees to live and to bloom. So we're pretty lucky to have them here. Do the flowers have a scent? Let's test this. It's really, really, really subtle. You can hardly smell it, but that's to my human nose. Remember, these flowers are creating nectar to attract pollinators like bees and flies, and those insects actually have a much stronger sense of smell than us humans do. So bees and flies would probably be able to smell the nectar a lot better than we can. Next question, can I have cherry blossom trees in my backyard? The answer is yes. Many local nurseries do sell cherry blossom trees, and they do grow in many backyards in the city. But you should also consider planting native species of cherries too. Black cherry, pin cherry, choke cherry are all great, great options for local wildlife. So we hope that you enjoyed viewing the blossoms with us today. We hope that you had a good, strong connection with the nature in High Park as well. And we would like to thank you for keeping the community safe and staying home and viewing the blossoms from home this year. We have a little bit more time, so we're going to get up close with the cherry blossoms again. Hope you enjoy the view.